Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Again, I go back with both you guys for a while, so I don't really need to introduce myself, but I will for purposes of people watching at home. I'm John Paris. I'm the chair of the Asian American Group's Endorsement Committee, and on behalf of our entire panel, we appreciate the two of you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us on what appears to be a glorious afternoon outside. Seated on the right-hand side of your screen is Mr. Steve Yeager. He is the Democratic candidate for State Assembly District 9. Seated on the left is Mr. Jason Frierson, who is the Democratic candidate in State Assembly District 8. At this point in time, I normally introduce who the Asian American Group is to the candidates we're interviewing, but the two of you have heard me say that spiel more than once. I will spare you to allow more time for the voters who are watching this at home and the people on the dais to get to know the candidates better, which is the real reason that we're here. First question, and I'll start with Steve, and obviously give Jason an opportunity to respond, is as follows. Why have you decided to run for this particular race at this particular time?
You know, I've decided to run because I think what happened during the 2015 legislative session was a disappointment in terms of, you know, for the longest time, the legislature here was something we could be proud of, and there was a real effort to bring consensus you know, with Democrats and Republicans to pass good legislation. I think in 2015 what we saw was kind of a DC style political climate imported here to the state of Nevada, where things were much more partisan, where folks were much less willing to listen to the other side and to incorporate good ideas. And I say that because I was up at last session on behalf of the Public Defender's Office, so I saw what it was like there. And upon coming back from session, I decided that that's not something I wanted to see in the future for Nevada. I do not want to see DC-style politics here, so I'm running to bring back respectability to the legislature, and so that the representatives, the voters in Assembly District 9 will have a voice and someone who listens to them and advocates for them at the legislature.
Thank you. Jason.
Thank you. You know, look, I'm running because I feel like I still have something to contribute to the state. I served in 2011 and in 2013 and feel like I contributed a great deal to the state. I contributed a great deal in criminal justice reform and in child welfare, protecting kids, and a bunch of other areas. You know, this legislative process was here before I got here. It's going to be here long after I'm gone. But I feel like this upcoming session, after the chaos of last session, could benefit from relationships and a historical context that is focused on a process with integrity, a process where we can provide folks with certainty about where we're going as a state. And I believe that my relationships both with the lobby corps and with my colleagues or former colleagues both in the Assembly and the Senate in both parties, I think is more needed this upcoming cycle than it ever has been before. And when I walk away, as long as I left it better than I found it, I'll be happy. But I believe this upcoming session needs that relationship factor more than ever.
This election cycle has been rather unique, more so than many others, in that people like Trump and Sanders kind of tapped into portions of the populace that felt they were unrepresented or underrepresented. What ideas do you have, and we'll start with Jason and then go to Steve. Jason, what ideas do you have to try and keep those individuals who feel themselves to be disenfranchised, to keep them active in the political process, not only for the upcoming vote in November, but going forward thereafter?
Well, you know, I think I bring a unique perspective because I lobbied for the Public Defender's Office, then I served, then I lost and watched this cycle, and now I'm running again. I think all of those things speak to the need to continue to reach out to folks that don't traditionally feel like they have had a voice. I think being a public defender, that was our job. For 7.5 years, I represented people who had never had anybody stand up to them for them before. I lost this last election by 40 votes. I think that was a reflection of what was normally 60 to 80% voter turnout. Last year was 30% voter turnout. And I think it was a direct reflection of folks feeling disengaged. And so I think that we, regardless of party, have to reach out to voters in a way that resonates with them in a way that they remember it in a non-presidential year so that we don't have uncertainty every 2 years. It starts at the door, but it also starts with messaging that's not cookie cutter political points, but an actual message and an actual commitment to connecting with those individual voters across party lines that I think is going to be the beginning of new kinds of relationships that we have with voters, so that we can say to them at the door and in Carson City, you know, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, they're not going to decide how much your kid's teacher gets paid. They're not going to decide how much the speeding ticket is that you may get. They're not going to decide how long it takes to fix the pothole on the road on the way to work. That's local, and I think when we can connect with folks in a meaningful way on a regular basis, that's what we remind them of, and that's what they remember, especially in those off years.
Steve?
I think that was very well stated. I think the only thing I would add is, you know, absolutely reaching out to voters in a one-on-one setting, whether it is at their door, on the phones, or at events. I mean, the number one way I think to make folks feel engaged in the process is to extend a hand to them and to say, look, I'm running to represent you. Here's my cell phone number. Here is my email address. If you've got a concern, you can contact me directly. And, you know, I tell folks this: if you call this cell phone number, that's my cell phone that's in my pocket. It's not somebody at a desk who's going to answer that call. And I think that's a big difference with the federal races. You know, it's virtually impossible to get in touch with a federally elected official. You have to go through so many layers of bureaucracy there. So, you know, I know Jason's been doing this and I've been doing this cycle. It's just talking to voters primarily at the doors. And also, as Jason said, making sure that they know what the difference is between the federal and the state, because so often in a voter's mind that's just kind of jumbled together, and they tend to think, well, everything is what I see on TV in terms of these negative ads and these attack pieces, and it's not like that on the state level. You know, on the state level, we have to get along. We can't shut down the government. We can't deficit spend. We have limits and we have to work together. So I think my experience has been, one, you're right. Some folks are disengaged and they feel disenfranchised, but in my conversations with them, when I talk to them about what exactly it is on the state level that we're doing and how it impacts them on a day-to-day basis, they do seem to appreciate that. Now, I don't know what they're going to do with the federal races, but I feel pretty comfortable that, you know, everyone that Jason and I talk to about the local races, that's someone we're going to be able to energize and also give them a point person of contact if there's something going on in their particular neighborhood.
You had mentioned issues that affect people from a day-to-day basis. One of the most important issues for everyone on this dais is education. And I'm sure that's just as important for the two of you sitting up there. You know, we have children, we care about Nevada, and the national ranking for our education system here is hovering around 47-ish. That's the plural. What ideas do you have, Steve, more short term, to try and get us moving in the right direction, assuming you are elected to the Assembly?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Education, I think, has to be first and foremost on our minds. If we're not educating our youth, I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to the future of the state. You know, one, education, I don't believe in this state has ever been fully funded to the extent it should be. Sure, there was some additional funding added in 2015, but really when you look at the history of education, that was just somewhat restoring of funding that was cut during the recession. So I think, number one, to look at, are we adequately funding education? Number two, how is the funding formula working? How are we dividing that money up? Because as we know, we have some unique needs here in Clark County that other parts of the state don't have. So are we allocating that money in a way that makes sense? And that's something that can be, you know, that can be modified by the legislature. I would like to see us pay our teachers an amount that tells them that they're valued and we appreciate what they're doing. I think teachers here have an extremely difficult job, and we don't yet compensate them in a way that tells them that they're appreciated and respected. In addition, that would help us with recruiting teachers, because as you know, we always have a shortage going into the school year, and it's hard to get someone to come here when you look at the starting salaries. I just talked to a voter today who said, I was a teacher in California. I wanted to come to Las Vegas 20 years ago, and I didn't because the pay was so low. So she waited till she retired as a teacher in California, and then she moved here. So I'd like to see us work on that. In terms of the day-to-day, I would like to see us continue to emphasize and augment early childhood education. I think that's so critically important to make sure that we are getting our students up to speed where they need to be as early as possible. And I also think we can be creative in the after-school arena in terms of parental involvement, community involvement. What are our kids doing after school? And particularly for the ones who don't have parental involvement, either because the parents aren't there or they're working multiple jobs, can we come up with some community-based approach to make sure that those kids aren't falling behind? Because I really do think it does take a community to make this successful. So those are a few of, I would say, the short-term ideas that I would like to see us address in the next legislative session.
Jason, short-term suggestions.
You know, short term, I think we just passed a tax package that is intending to better fund education. Those bills just went out, and so I don't know that we'll see the results of that until next month. Businesses won't relocate to Nevada unless we have an education system they feel confident in for their children. And I think that Steve spoke to the other impacts that happen when children aren't adequately prepared in school. But I think in the short term, we have to see what revenue is going to come in based on the tax package from last year. I think that we have to see the results of the deconsolidation efforts that they've just approved rules for that shift money more to the individual schools so that schools can make decisions based on their individual needs. I think we do need to fill vacancies. We can't continue to educate our children with short-term substitute teachers. We have to have teachers that are invested and prepared and trained and licensed to teach our kids. And we have to, regardless of how, and I don't know what amount it is for teacher salaries, but for a teacher to do their job, they cannot have to dig in their own pockets to provide supplies to do their job. I think that if we're going to expect them to spend that amount of time with our children, then we have to give them the tools. And it's not just a function of throwing money at it, but I always say, you know, you won't get fruit if you don't water the tree. And so we haven't really watered the tree yet to know what benefits we'll have. But when we're ranking behind Mississippi, it's a problem. And we have to do something about it. We have to be open-minded to move forward, but we have to do something.
You're actually the second candidate to reference the state of Mississippi and its horrible education ranking. And again, the consensus seems to be that we're a little bit ahead, maybe we're a little bit behind, but to be mentioned, with all due respect to Mississippians, it's horrible and it needs to be addressed. So we appreciate your efforts. Assuming you're elected, we'll appreciate your efforts in dealing with that problem. You had mentioned, Jason, businesses relocating here, and I know Dennis has a question along those lines for the both of you as well. Dennis?
Oh, okay. So based on that, I mean, we know, like you said, that businesses aren't going to move here unless the education's there. But say that we're tackling that. What are some of your ideas to actually get more businesses here? Like, we have Tesla in the north and we have Faraday here in the south. What is your ideas, short-term ideas to get more businesses and attract more businesses here?
Well, I think the first thing is improving our education system, quite frankly. I think that in and of itself, with our no state income tax atmosphere here, I think we remain a competitive state, but we have to start there. I also think, look, there are only so many Tesla and Faraday projects out there, where the rubber hits the road is with small businesses, and giving people both here already an opportunity to either expand their existing business or use their entrepreneurial spirit to start a business. And we have to make sure that we have an environment where they're able to do that. Part of that is, I believe, a certain level of certainty. We have been talking about the tax structure every 2 years, and what that does is that creates confusion about what the environment is going to look like every 2 years. So I think that we have to let the dust settle. We have to give our partners in the community certainty about the future so that people can invest and make long-term plans to open brick and mortars. Those are the ones that are hiring. I mean, there's an age where we're, with the internet, where you don't necessarily even have to have a building here. So we want to encourage those folks that are here or willing to come here and employ folks here by looking at, stability and certainty for the short and long term. I think this last tax effort was a valiant effort, quite frankly, given the chaos in the session. But with 120 days, that doesn't give us a whole lot of time to have meaningful analysis. So I think that we have to be willing to constantly revisit it, to tweak it and adjust it, not necessarily flip it over, because we do want that certainty, but I think we have to be willing to revisit, how we treat a small business versus a large chain business. We have to make sure that we acknowledge there is a difference, and that if we want to make sure a small business can thrive, that we have to have policies that take into consideration they don't have the same structure that a large chain corporation would have. So I think those are things that we have to look at and be mindful. I'm confident that this assembly is going to be very small business minded, or at least conscious, and taking that into consideration, again, within the 120 days that we have to do it. We'll just pick up where they left off, hopefully, and get some positive adjustments done.
A couple ideas that I think we may see come up in the next session. One would be workforce development. When we're talking big businesses and new industries, it's great if we have these businesses relocate here, but one of the draws for them is to be able to say, we are going to have Nevada workers ready to go who can fill these jobs, so you don't have to do too much on the training front, or you don't have to be importing workers from California or Utah or Arizona, because that is really of little benefit to our workers here. So I think that kind of initiative starts with our high schools, starts with our community colleges. I mean, let's look at how we're educating folks. For instance, we know that a four-year college isn't going to be right for everybody, but what other programs do we have for folks who may want to go into the Teslas, the Faradays of the world? So, to be able to have an infrastructure in place where when we're courting businesses to come here, we can very quickly create a curriculum, a programming that's going to fit with their needs. I think that really helps the business, and obviously helps Nevadans have those jobs. And then I think the other one is just making sure that whatever infrastructure we have set up in the state, and by infrastructure I mean in terms of the business infrastructure, the filings that need to be done, the reports, the tax returns, that we're making sure that as a legislature, to the extent possible, these different agencies communicate with each other and it's effective and efficient, so businesses aren't spending inordinate amounts of time on compliance with various state laws. And that sort of goes to what Jason said, just in terms of certainty. I know I've heard some frustrations about the way the new commerce tax was enacted, and how you've got to go in and fill out a new form on a new website with a new password. And for me, we're here in the year 2016. We ought to be able to streamline this in a way so that our various state agencies are communicating with one another, and it truly is a one-stop shop, particularly for small businesses, because every second they can save on that kind of red tape compliance is an effort they can be making on improving the business, hiring new workers, or marketing.
Thank you.
You had mentioned taxes. One area that we've been discussing with a lot of different candidates today has been the proposed public subsidy that may be tossed at the Raiders. Now, as small children, or as young or even old adults, we thought about, hey, it'd be really cool to own a football team. It'd be really cool to have one here. But from a more pragmatic perspective, we need to look into the details and to see if it is beneficial for Nevadans as a whole. What metrics do you, and we'll start with Steve, what metrics do you plan on focusing on when determining if public monies should be used to subsidize another one of the multitude of stadiums for this multi-billion-dollar conglomerate known as the NFL?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the number one priority has to just be, does it make sense for the public? Is there going to be some kind of anticipated return there? Now, obviously we're never going to be in a scenario where there's a guaranteed sort of return, but the way that I would look at this, and I think if you do your research and you look at other states or cities who have courted and brought NFL stadiums, typically it has not worked well for the public there, I think, almost without exception. So, the question that I have is Las Vegas different enough? Is our market and the way we brand ourselves and our tourist industry, is that different enough that we would succeed where other places have failed? So that's, that's one of the metrics that I would like to look at. What do we actually anticipate would be the impact of the NFL team here in terms of, are we going to be able to bring fans from outside the state? Are they going to stay? Are they going to spend money here? With Las Vegas being a tourist destination, my initial inclination would be we're probably going to be more successful at putting together packages for people to come here than maybe you would in a St. Louis or another destination. So, that's going to be number one, is in terms of the NFL season itself, what kind of impact do we think it would have locally? And then two, what would it mean for Las Vegas just in marketing as a destination to, one, have an NFL team or have an NFL stadium that could bring big events like a Super Bowl, for instance, here. What would it mean for UNLV to be able to play in a domed stadium that's not outside when it's 110 degrees? There's talk about would that potentially lead to UNLV being courted to go to a bigger sports conference, and what impact would that have on the athletic department, the student body? So, those are sort of the metrics that I would look at to say, is this something long-term that would be profitable and would make a lot of sense for Las Vegas and for Nevada. And I can tell you, I'm not yet there on a conclusion, but that's kind of the way I look at it, is I think people make valid points about other cities having bad experiences, but the question is, are we different enough, and in what ways, and would it make it profitable to do that here?
Similarly, I mean, I think that the analysis has to include those factors that Steve mentioned. I think, we not being elected currently are not privy to the details of whatever plan is being discussed. But I think we have to look at the actual plan, the cost, the at least hoped or predicted benefit. It's so difficult without seeing what they're talking about. But there are concerns about using public money in a state where we have a limited way of providing for our basic needs. And I think that's the biggest concern for me. In addition to those factors, I think we have to look at our own infrastructure and the traffic that it's going to bring. And in addition to building the stadium, how much the surrounding roads are going to have to be improved or expanded to accommodate it. I think that we have to look at all of those factors to do a real adequate cost-benefit analysis of it. Not only do we need to look at how it has or has not worked in other cities, but we have to look at in what ways this plan is different that would take into account those reasons why it didn't work in other cities. What is the at least plan for a return on that investment? Who's going to own it after the lease is up? Who's going to be responsible if it doesn't pay for itself in the 20 or 30 years, which is the typical time period for a stadium? I think we have to look at all of those things. Las Vegas is very unique, and I think we do have some benefits that are haven't been seen in a proposed city for a team in a long time. But we have to be responsible stewards with public money, and we have to keep in mind there was a portion of the room tax years ago that was diverted away from K-12. And so we have to look at taking care of our basic needs, taking care of our schools, our roads, our hospitals, our emergency rooms, law enforcement and the influx of people for a weekend, for example. These are all indirect impacts on the community that we have to take into consideration. If they get there, I certainly need to hear more details and ask a lot of questions.
Well, we are coming right up against the end of our time frame for you guys. So why don't we end it with this? We'll start with Jason and go to Steve. Jason, give us some 60 seconds. Why are you the best candidate for State Assembly District 8?
I have a proven track record of my involvement in the Southwest and in my district. I have met both of my opponents. I don't campaign negatively. I think that my history in the district and my history in the legislature is an asset to the state and to the district, and my commitment to being accessible to my neighbors, I think, is what makes this process tick. I haven't been more dedicated than I am right now to do just that. And so I believe that I'm best situated to bring that perspective to Carson City in a way that best benefits the state.
Steve, why are you the better candidate?
I think what makes me the better candidate is just how hard I've been working. I've been out knocking on doors, talking to voters for months now, and talking to them by phone, and I feel like I have a good sense of what the issues are in Assembly District 9. which again is the southwest Las Vegas, so we have some interesting infrastructure issues out there with all the growth that's happening. But I feel like I have a good sense of the concerns. The voters in District 9 know that if they call me on my phone, I will answer it or I will return their call promptly. And in addition to that, just the last couple of sessions, spending time at the state legislature, meeting with legislators, meeting with other lobbyists. I feel like I'm in a unique position to be able to hit the ground running from day one, to not have to learn the ropes, but to really be able to jump in there. And I just think those personal relationships that I've developed over the last really 4 or 5 years are going to be a real benefit to the voters in District 9.
Perfect. Well, gentlemen, one last thing. 2 things. First, once we're done, we'd love to take some photographs with it if you don't mind. Second, we are having our 12th annual awards banquet, we meaning the AAG. 12th annual awards banquet on the 24th of this month. It's held at the at Treasure Island. We will be celebrating 13 different individuals, members of the greater Las Vegas community, who have really given back to the community. Doctors, people who have made significant charitable donations, not in a singular manner, but through the course of over a long period of time. You're both more than invited to join us. We're doing cocktails from 5:30 to 7, and then from 7 o'clock till 9 is the actual program itself, with presentations for all of the honorees. We do have some flyers here we'll hand you that has all the details on it, but if you are available that weekend, I realize that it's a very busy time. It'll be a rough 57 days for the 2 of you and your families, and my condolences to both of you in that respect. But if you have time, we would love to see you, even if it's just during the cocktail hour, we'd love to have you come join us.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you for having us.